Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I'm going to show you my updated version of BOSSK Blue and how to play the deck in the current metagame. So, as usual, this video is sponsored by Card Market, the biggest marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. So here's the list that I currently play with, and this is the list I won a store showdown with. It's also the list that T85 brought to the PQ Munich, and he was day one undefeated. Unfortunately, he lost in top 8 versus a Sabine player, even though he actually won versus the winner of the tournament doing split against Dylan. So I'm pretty sure he would have done a much better performance. But yeah, top 8 is still very good, and I'm pretty sure he would have been able to do much better than us if he, with a bit of luck. I mean, you always need a bit of luck here to win tournaments. In any case, we have been doing pretty well with this list, T85 and I, and this is pretty much our current version of the deck, and I'll explain you the choice between every different choices. So, first of all, what are we getting from Jump to Light Speed for this deck? Obviously, you're going to start with the obvious. We're getting 3 copies of No Glory Only Results, which is basically a strict replacement over Fel Dragon. Yeah, so you would think the Fel Dragon does cost 1 less, which is significant, but it turns out that we have other cheaper removal that we can use most of the time, like Power Dark Side, Merciless Contest, Takedown, that most of the time are good enough for us to deal with smaller threats. And whenever we want to deal with something larger, No Glory Only Results is the ability to basically trigger the when defeated effect of your opponent is extremely powerful. It's very powerful against a number of cards that are usually very strong against us. Cards like K2SO. It also allows you to play around Chewbacca. Things like the TIE Phantom with extra tokens on it used to be a very big counter to BOSSK. This No Glory Result solved that problem as well. It also deals with just a number of cards that used to be an issue and now no longer an issue. Tons of cards with very powerful when defeated effect that used to be those kind of cards are very strong against BOSSK. Super Laser Technician is also a great counter Super Laser Technician. It just is an amazing addition to the deck. It's by far the biggest upgrade the deck had from the new set. Other than this, the other difference, we're not playing any other card from the new set, just in the sideboard 3 copies of Sham Syndulla and 2 copies of Annihilator. So Sham Syndulla, we'll talk a bit about it later on, but it's a great counter to any ramp decks or any hand decks. The ability, of course, to ramp us up is very, very valuable in a deck like BOSSK that does play a lot of expensive cards. So the ability to put a threat on the board that can help us stabilize the game and at the same time ramp is very valuable. And finally, 2 copies of Annihilator, which is one of the greatest answer to enemy capital ship we could possibly get. It's a great counter to Relentless, which, as you know, is one of the biggest counter to BOSSK Blue and to hard controls in general. And Annihilator does a great job at getting rid of them, and there's no much your opponent can do to prevent this, which is one of the most important part about it. I'll go into a bit more details about it, and pretty much those are the new cards. And there's some changes that we made to the deck list in order to adapt it to the meta. We are going back in playing Fel Dragons, which is very powerful, I think, in the current meta. It's one of the best finisher you could hope for. We're running 1 copy of Lone Pike in the main deck, which is very useful in matchup against Quinnland, notably, where he really has a tendency to starve us out of cards. Having like just 1 smuggle card we can get out smuggle is very useful in this kind of matchup. It doesn't take a lot of space in the deck, and it can make a big difference. As usual, as it is my current strategy, I like to pre-side versus hard control, so I get my Bounty Hunter crew and my restock in my main deck to win game 1 against hard control decks that are not running those cards. And once the game 1 is won, usually, it's not always true, but usually there's not enough time for game 2, which means that I will be able to win the matchup 1-0. The sideboard doesn't matter so much. Obviously, it's not always true, but it's often true. And since hard control is not seeing a lot of play right now, I feel comfortable with this current game plan. And then the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect from the way I like to run BOSSK. I like to be very heavy-handed on the top end, especially in this meta where your opponent is going to be discarding our cards a lot, notably against Quinnland. So we have those kind of top deck battles, and having a lot of very big top hands is very useful in those matchups. It's also very strong against other control decks to have like a lot of top ends basically. So, and there's a couple of interesting solutions that we have in the sideboard that also helps us answer the meta. I think this is really in the sideboard that you see the biggest difference between my current version of the deck and the ones from set 3, is because I'm adapting the deck a lot to the meta in the sideboard. So we're going into the full lengthy kind of sideboard plan. If you don't know anything about BOSSK Blue, I advise you to watch my previous first video about BOSSK Blue where I explain the ins and outs of the decks, of course everything about the bounties and stuff. But first of all, why would you want to, so I'll encourage you to go back into this list. So just as a general overview, why would you consider want to play BOSSK Blue? So the reason why I think, why I would want to play BOSSK Blue is because BOSSK Blue is the most well-rounded hard control deck. So if you are in a meta that does not expect hard control to be a thing, and you want to play a deck that can beat pretty much anything, there's a few exceptions which I'll get into, but that can pretty much beat anything, BOSSK control is the best bet. So obviously there's a hard control, yellow hard control. Yellow hard control is very strong in a mirror match, but it's not as capable of beating notably aggro. Those kind of like yellow hard control is really bad against hard control, against aggro, while BOSSK Blue is completely capable of beating aggro. It's a much well-rounded deck. It's a deck that is capable to beat a wider variety of different decks. Compared to the yellow hard control, which are a bit more specialized. So basically the game plan for yellow, if you're running into a big tournament, is to get into their draw bracket. So then they're only going to be facing other control decks. They get a draw early in the tournament, and they enter in this kind of parallel universe where they're only going to be facing other decks that have a draw as well, which are likely to be either very late game focused mid-range decks, soft control decks, or hard control decks. And this means that in those matchups, this deck has a huge advantage. So if you are going to be playing a very large tournament, I do not necessarily advise to be running BOSSK Blue, because this deck has still relatively high chance to get a draw, and if you get a draw early, then you're going to be facing possibly those kind of super hard yellow control decks, and this might actually cause you a lot of issues. This is pretty much what happened to Tim, also known as T85, when he was playing in Liverpool. He was playing this BOSSK Blue deck, and it was doing very well, and then he got himself into a draw, and then he got entered into this parallel universe, and then he lost to a hard control yellow decks that was very well prepared for the mirror match. So it is something that you have to consider now in very large tournaments, at least until the rule is changed. It's going to be difficult to play BOSSK Blue in a very large tournament where there's this option of draw bracket happening. But if you're going to be playing a tournament, a PQ size tournament, BOSSK Blue is a really great choice, and I'll explain why in this video. So overall, as I said, just the long story short, BOSSK Blue is the most well-rounded control decks in the meta. It's a control deck that is capable of beating a larger amount of different decks, and I think it's the right choice if you're going to be running into a medium to small size tournament if you want to play a hard control deck and you think the meta is not well equipped against hard control. So moving on now to the matchup. So let's talk about the Sabine matchup. So contrary to what many people believe, Sabine is not a bad matchup. And the reason is because we have basically the traditionally aggro decks do pretty well against hard control decks. But that's not really but BOSSK does have some really powerful tool that really helps in the matchup, notably the double bounty redemption, being able to redeem a top target or a client twice. And that's something that is relatively consistent because you're running 3 top targets, 3 clients, and obviously the BOSSK ability is always available. And obviously you're gonna the strategy is like you're gonna be flipping on turn 5, and your opponent doesn't have a way to one-shot BOSSK. You can very easily then double redeem. Of course, sometimes your opponent can ambush into it, but then you also have counterplays. You can either decide to pass. So if your opponent is holding out the 5 resource to be able to ambush, into BOSSK, all you can do is just play your cards normally, play your removal, clean up the board, and then you put yourself in a situation where it's pretty much just a win-win situation. It's like, if I deploy BOSSK, if you decide to play your resource, then I can just deploy my BOSSK, and then I can double redeem. And if you don't, if you decide to hold on and pass and wait for BOSSK to come out to ambush it, I can just take the initiative and then suddenly you haven't spent your 4 resource, and obviously as you are the aggro player, you're supposed to be the one putting the threats on the board, and if nothing is happening, it advantages me. So if you were smart, you basically it's relatively easy to play around the ambush into BOSSK thing, and this way you can just double read him. Of course, sometimes you're not gonna find your top target, so there's still things that can happen. Sometimes the pressure happens, it's so hard. There's certain situation in which things don't happen. But basically, the game playing with BOSSK against aggro is very simple. You're going to be skipping your turn 1. And you're going to be playing a removal on the unit that was played on turn 1, because the worst thing that could happen to you is if Chewbacca is played on space unit on turn 2. And this cannot happen if you kill that unit. If you take the initiative and then kill that unit, it literally cannot happen. And since we're playing 9 removal, we're playing 3 perilous position, 3 power dark side, 3 what's it called? 3 open fire. We will be able to kill whatever comes out. There's no way we're gonna have an opening hand that doesn't have any of those cards. Like, it's very unlikely, especially on turn 2 as you get to draw extra cards as well. So it's very, very consistent. So if you have a Pershing, so a turn 1 play, do not play your Pershing if that means losing initiative. So basically play your Pershing. If you're playing first, then you can play your Pershing and then take initiative. But then if you're playing second, prioritize taking initiative so you can kill that turn 1 play and this Chewbacca. And then if Chewbacca happens any later than that, is a lot worse, because suddenly we get into no glory only result, and then we can just kill it like that way. So it's kind of like not really. So this is something that you have to be very wary about. So the hard control decks that I see losing is they simply just don't prioritize taking initiative to kill the turn 1 play with a removal, and that's basically all they lose. I also see some hard control players do not run Charleston in the deck. At least they're not running it in the main deck, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why they're struggling against Sabine, because Charleston is one of the best cards you could ever play against Sabine. It's a great blocker, it's a great way to protect your boss, so you can kind of deploy your boss more aggressively, and you get a huge protection here. It forces the ECL use. It's very difficult for Sabine to kill a Charleston efficient, a 6/6 Sentinel efficiently without using ECL. So it's a really, really great card. Sabine can sometimes win with Dark Sabers. Like, Dark Sabers can be difficult for BOSSK to deal with. That's why I also need Charleston to kind of block it out, deal a bunch of damage to it, to then finish him with another removal. Or you're trying to catch a moment in which you can play Power Dark Side, but usually Sabine players are pretty smart. They're not going to play Dark Saber into a Power Dark Side. So this is where sometimes it can be interesting to represent Power Dark Side, even though you actually don't have it in hand, just to make your opponent respect it and force him into another play that would be worse, but wouldn't get being blown out by a Power Dark Side. So this is like a kind of like little tricks and things that you want to know in order to get this matchup right. Another thing as well, so for the sideboard is very simple. We are basically heading 2 confiscates. A confiscate are very useful. It's another answer against Chewbacca. It's an answer to Luke, which is also a great card against hard control. It's also an answer, of course, against the Dark Sabers and those kind of expensive upgrades. So Confiscate really, really does a good job at this, and we're going to be taking out, of course, the 2 cards that are for the hard control matchup, the Restocks and Bounty Hunter Crew, which are absolutely useless in this matchup. So this is a pretty easy thing. So I rate this matchup as slightly favorable. My estimation would be like a 60%, 40%, assuming you know what the matchup is about. Obviously, Sabine has certain lines of play, certain turns that are very difficult to beat. But this is something, BOSSK Control is one of the few decks in the game that can do very well against Sabine. So the next matchup is the Kira matchup. So Kira has been historically a very good matchup for hard control. But it depends. So basically the strategy of Kira in this matchup is they're going to be conceding game 1 most likely, and then in game 2 they're going to be trying to win by relentless into Palpatine's returns. And even with the relentless / Palpatine's return line of play, it's still not like an amazing matchup for them. It's going to be like much closer. It's going to be slightly favorable for them, but it's not going to be like super favorable. And the thing is, because they lost game 1, they have the pressure is on their side, because they mean they have to win the 2 subsequent games, and even winning game 2 is not going to be necessarily going to take is not necessarily going to be easy. And if they lose any of those 2 games, they basically lose the entire match, because so there is a consequence in basically auto conceding game 1, and you have to be extremely confident into your ability to switch the matchup around in game 2 and game 3. And indeed, the matchup changes drastically after sideboard, but it doesn't change to the point where it's not changing to the point where it completely just like turns into an auto win for Kira. It's far from an auto win. It is definitely getting a lot tougher. And another thing that has made this matchup a lot tougher for Kira has been the new cards for Jump to Light Speed. We are obviously getting 2 great additions for this matchup, which is Shamsindula and Annihilator. So Shamsindula is great against Kira because of course Kira is going to be looking to ramp in the rest of the game. So it allows us to ramp as well, and allows us to get faster into our expensive late game cards, and obviously our Annihilators and stuff. Annihilators is one of the greatest tools because it's a way for us to not only remove the Relentless, but also remove any other copies of Relentless in the deck. Usually they're going to be playing 2, but already getting rid of 2 Relentless in 1 streak is huge. One of the things as well is that Relentless, the greatest Relentless of Relentless is Avenger, but the problem with Avenger is that your opponent can play around it very easily by just playing some extra unit on the side in order to absorb the hit, to absorb the when defeated effect. But Annihilator, you cannot do this because you get with Annihilator you get to choose the unit to kill. So in this case, you can just simply target Relentless and target Relentless. And another good thing about Annihilator is that if your opponent plays, the main answer the opponent is going to have to Annihilator is like either they're going to have to use a removal. I mean, No Glory result is not so good against, because yes, they get to steal and then use the when defeated effect against us, but most likely we're only going to have 1 spaceship in play. So his main answers is going to be something like Avenger or Devastators, but then we can kill something on the way back. He's going to have to use like a standard removal to use it. So he doesn't have like great answers to our Annihilators. However, the fact that Annihilator when defeated effect is very helpful to kind of trade back against another spaceship. So Annihilator is just really amazing in this matchup. He also might be playing some Annihilators depending on the version of the deck, but it's still something that I think it kind of like balance it out. Overall, I feel like the matchup is much easier to manage than it was in set 3, because Annihilators is such a great answer to Relentless, and because Shamsindula just pushes further. So overall, I think it's a favorable matchup. The Kira players did make some adjustments to their deck that does make the matchup a bit more complicated. For example, they play Data Vaults, having an extra 10 cards in their deck can be annoying for us because it makes them more difficult to mill. But overall, I don't think it makes a huge difference. And I think the overall advantage is that we have. So basically, the way this matchup usually plays out is that we're going to be he's not really able to kill us because he doesn't have that many threats in his deck, and the threats are easy for us to answer. And we're not able to kill them because we don't play that many threats, and he also has quite a bit of answers. So it's kind of like this classic control versus control. But basically, we win because we are going to be running three vigilances, where our opponent is going to be running three vigilance, 1 restock, and 1 bounty hunter crew, where our opponent usually going to be running 3 vigilances. So obviously that gives us an advantage because we are guaranteed to draw those cards at some point, and having an extra vigilance and an extra restock in the deck just makes a massive difference. So obviously it depends on the version of the deck. If your opponent plays restock in the main deck, he also let's say he plays bounty hunter crew. I don't see any Kira player really doing that, but if they are very well prepared against the hard control, then it's a different story. But I'm just talking about the standard. By the way, guys, this all like matchup breakdown is basically here assuming we are running against the standard version of the deck. And the standard version of Kira right now has basically 3 vigilance in the main deck, and they're gonna have the relentless Paps returned in the sideboard. That's pretty much how they play out. So that's kind of like the common thing. And under those circumstances, Kira is definitely a favorable matchup for hard control. So what we're taking out the heal, which is not so important. The perilous position, which doesn't really kill anything, and actually sometimes pretty awkward because you're leaving a unit in play that you're gonna need to kind of kill it later on, because it just becomes then an annoyance for Paradoxite. Still a couple of cards that can be killed. Usually when Sometimes there's also like Kira likes to damage his own unit to give them shield, and Paris position can counter that, I guess. But overall, it's not a great card. And we're adding I Am Your Father, which most likely is gonna deal 7 damage, because I don't think the Kira player ever wants us to draw 3 cards, but 7 damage for 3 is a very good deal. So yeah, so yeah, it's a favorable matchup. Once again, depending on the version of the deck, you could be running against someone crazy who's running restock, vigilance in the main, stuff like this, like even relentless in the main, like that can happen. But as I said, once again, we're talking about the standard version of the deck. Moving on, we got the Quinnland matchup. So Quinnland matchup to me is slightly unfavorable. I feel like obviously Quinnland has everything we hate. It has a lot of hand disruption, which is very good against hard control. It's a relatively aggressive deck that is able to put a lot of pressure on us. And it's a deck with a lot of ways to deal direct damage, with the Cassian, with the Cassian, with the Falcons, which are very annoying for control to deal with. With that being said, there's a couple of tools that BOSSK has that is very, very helpful. And one of the great things that BOSSK has access to is loads of ways to draw cards. It runs notably the Death Mark, which obviously if you can get a Death Mark and double trigger Death Mark into BOSSK, you can literally just win the game. You can just literally win the game. So that's really, really useful, because if you draw 4 cards in this matchup, it's all about a war of attrition. Usually the Quinnland is not really able to put a tremendous amount of pressure against us early on, but however, what they're capable of doing is stripping us out of cards, and once we strip out of the card, they usually can run us down, and we have to rely on our top deck, which sometimes can be very random. If you wonder why I Am Your Father is in the sideboard, it is mostly for this matchup. I Am Your Father is an amazing card against Quinnland, because it's a very, very efficient removal. There's a lot of like very large units that you can one-shot with I Am Your Father, and your opponent is almost never going to let us draw a card. If your opponent is going to let us draw 3 cards with I Am Your Father, it is absolutely game-breaking for them. So it's really the kind of card where both aspects of the card are so strong that regardless of what your opponent chooses, we're always kind of happy, very happy about it. So I Am Your Father is just a great, great card in this particular matchup. And we are sending out 1 late game card like Vader Dragon, and we're sending out the Restock and Bounty onto Crew. So yeah, I feel like I Am Your Father is really the card that is really kind of helping so much in this matchup. With that being said, Quinnland usually is going to play some anti-upgrade after sideboard, and anti-upgrades are really strong against us. So there's some give and takes. Even after sideboard, it's not necessarily better. It really comes down to what kind of sideboard your opponent has. If he's running like, is he running like Pillage, that kind of thing. If he's running like Pillage, a lot of anti-upgrades, the matchup could be tougher. I know most Quinnland versions don't run Pillage anymore, so it really comes down to what kind of version of Quinnland you're running against. So it really comes down to the version once again, but overall I think it's a slightly unfavorable matchup, would be my estimation. Then we got the Ray Green matchup, which is a new deck that has kind of appeared since the performance of the deck in Lille. And basically this deck it's all about the value. The way the matchup goes is like Ray is not an aggressive enough deck to really win against you. Ray Green was not a deck that was designed to beat hard control, and it's a deck that will lose to hard control very hard. With that being said, it does have a very powerful late game engine, and the deck is also running some restock in the sideboard. So it's something you have to be wary about, and it is a deck that can win you if you're not aware of the tools that it has. But now the deck is relatively famous, so it's much easier for hard control to navigate it. So be aware of restock, and always keep a vigilance in your hand in case your opponent restocks. Try to focus on the value engine. The Ray deck has a very, very powerful engine when you can just draw card after card after card, and this engine can be very problematic for us to deal with. So you need to kind of have a win condition. The good news is that Ray Green does not run many removal for large units in pulse board. I think he's only running 2 copies of Fel Dragons in the main deck. It's only after sideboard that they add in all the Fel Dragon that really kind of balance things out. That means that if you manage to stick a very large units on the board, like an Avenger or a Cray Dragon, usually this card is going to win you the game or put you in a very good position. So this is kind of the plan to win the game, is to stick a very, very large unit to win the game, because you're not going to be able to exhaust them, because the deck is able to produce infinite value. So you're not going to be able to basically log them out. You need to kind of find a way to finish the game. So this is why we're heading up like 2 additional copies of Annihilator, which also allows us to get rid of the most annoying units in the matchup, which is obviously Ohm1. And we got the I Am Your Father because the card draw is so good, and then you can deal 7 damage once again to Luke. You can deal 7 damage to the leader. You can deal 7 damage to Ohm1 as well. So it's a one-shot Ohm1 or draw 3 cards. Both options are really, really strong. And then Shamsindula, because the opponent is running ramp, so having Shamsindula is a great way to get some board presence on the ground and ramp us at the same time. Even if it doesn't ramp us, it's still a pretty decent card. Usually, Ray, there's almost no way he's gonna win by really aggro. He's gonna outvalue us. Most likely, he's not really gonna kill us by just aggroing us out. He's gonna try to outvalue us, which means that top target becomes kind of not great. And also perilous position is not so great as well. Bounty Hunter Crew, I keep the restock, but I remove the Bounty Hunter Crew. I think just one restock is just in case the game goes really, really long, and you get basically a chance to restock yourself. But once again, the plan is pretty much just to go Vigilance. I think it's if your opponent managed to get like a restock out and you've played all of your Vigilances for some reason, which shouldn't be happening normally, you should, but basically the idea is you're gonna be going Vigilance, milling the rest of their card after he plays restock, and then if he plays another restock, then you can play another Vigilance, or you can have the restock to help us. This is some situation where restock can be useful. So that's overall kind of like what I like to keep, just one just in case. Moving on now to Anakin Blue. Anakin Blue is also a favorable matchup. It's a deck that is a lot more aggressive than Ray Green. It's not really winning with value, even though it has a lot of ways to deal 2-for-1, but it can usually win the game by having like an innocent Anakin that can deal a million damage. So in this case, once again, it's the outvalue plan that we are a little bit scared of. But even though the deck is a bit more aggressive, so we keep the top target. In this case, restock a Bounty Hunter really useless against most versions of the deck. He's not running any ramps, so we don't get the Shamsindula, and we get the I Am Your Father, which is once again, it's a one-shot answer to Luke, one-shot answer to Anakin, and if it doesn't let us deal 3 damage to it, we can just draw 3 cards, which is fantastic in the matchup. So both aspects of the cards are really, really amazing. Then we got the red, green, white mid-range decks. I think those matchups are even more favorable because without the blue, they don't have real answers to our late game threats, and they also don't have access to tons of 2-for-1 cards, like things like Yoda or the red leader that comes to play, draw a card. All those kind of 2-for-1 cards that are very, very powerful against control because they can kind of like outgas you. They don't have access to those cards in those color combinations. So it makes it so they have to be playing a lot more aggressive. They cannot really outvalue us. So they're gonna have to win by the aggressive route, and because they are slower than the traditional Sabine deck, they are really easy to handle for a control deck. So in this case, I'm just gonna add the Shamsindula because it's good against the ramp, which those decks will play, and then we just remove the super late game cards that are not so useful in this matchup. Non-yellow hard control deck, so the mirror match. This is pretty much the sideboard for a mirror match. We're basically making the deck a 55 card deck. I'm not necessarily a big fan of siding the entire sideboard and then removing nothing just to get like 60 cards, because then obviously that means you're gonna be diluting your good card and you're gonna have to put a bunch of bad cards into your deck that are really, really bad, and this could result into you not having an answer when you need it and stuff like this. So I like to keep the consistency, but I don't mind going over the 50 cards because obviously having extra cards can be useful whenever we're trying to melee each other. Also keep in mind that having more cards in the deck does reduces your chance to draw the Vigilance, which you definitely need to draw naturally before they get mailed out. So in this case, the sideboard is pretty much just Shamsindula because it's more threats, and sometimes your opponent is going to have more resource than you. You can just get a free resource like that. It's just a card. It's basically a Fightful that draws you a card in this matchup pretty much. You can just deny yourself, basically not resource on purpose, and then play Shamsindula. Just be careful that the top card that you resource is not going to be like a vigilance or something. That could be devastator. That could be really, really bad for you. So just be mindful of this. Annihilator is just a more late game card. And then I Am Your Father is kind of like, yeah, just going to be a deal 7 for 3 in this matchup, which is completely fine. And then the previous positions are pretty bad in this matchup because there's nothing that has 2 health, and you don't want just like to slow down a unit because then you're going to have to use a removal later on to finish it off anyway, so it's very awkward. So it's obviously balanced matchup because we have the same tool to the another. It's basically just who can get the better meal. Our plan is basically to try to get... Our plan against other art control deck is to try to win game 1 because we play Bounty Hunter Crew in the main. And the opponent most likely doesn't, and that can just win you the game on the spot. And then after sideboard, we hope that the game is going to go long enough that we don't have to, because if they have a solid anti-control sideboard, then we are pretty much screwed. But it's usually games go so long that doesn't necessarily happen. So it really comes down to luck. Obviously in this matchup is who can get the better round. There's a lot of subtle little things. I'm not going to go full guide on how to play the control mirror, but you get the idea. It's a balanced matchup. Obviously, yellow hard control is nearly unwinnable, and the reason is very simple, is because the games are so long, we're going to be basically drawing our entire deck, and that means that they're always going to consistently find the card that really makes the difference in this matchup, which is the Bounty Hunter Crew, which they're going to be playing 3 of in the main, as well as 3 Bazine, which they're also going to be playing in the main. So technically, we could play those cards as well, but for us, because they're out of aspect, the deck building cost of having to put those cards into our deck just for the hard control mirror is extremely high, and it puts you at a very, very big disadvantage in other matchups. So obviously we can't really afford to do that, but they can, and they will, and that means that you are pretty much guaranteed to lose, because if they have extra copies of vigilances and and ways for them to discard your vigilance, that's pretty much impossible to manage, especially in this matchup where you usually want to keep a vigilance out in order to mill out an opponent restock, and you cannot do this if your opponent just in problem is that keeping your vigilance in hand will just make your opponent just discard your vigilance using a Bazine, and that's pretty much all you use the game. So this matchup is unwinnable, and it's not represented how enough. I think it's a matchup that you really have to be wary about if you're going into a large tournaments because of the draw bracket. But other than this, it doesn't see much play, so it's not worthy for us to kind of change the deck. And probably if you really want to have a good matchup against the Mirror of Control, you're just better off running yellow hard control instead of trying to adapt your boss list to beat hard control, if that makes sense. Moving on, we got the Han1. So Han1, whether it's Han1 yellow or Han1 green, even though DJ has been banned, it still is a relatively unfavorable matchup. Obviously, once again, it comes down a lot to the different versions of the deck. How many Chewbacca is he running in the main? How many Ohm1 is he running in the main? Inside, is he running salvage? Is he running? There's just so many parameters that needs to be taken into account to know is this really like a bad matchup or not. But basically, it is a bad matchup because it's a deck that is able to pull up a lot of speed. It's much faster than the red-green mid-range decks because of its ability. It also plays yellow, which gives you access to Falcon, then Falcon into Home 1, into Falcon into Home 1. It's just like so much damage that comes out of nowhere. The ramp is just can put up in very far behind, like the speed. Like if he gets ramp on turn 2 and then doing reinforcement on turn 3, it's just so much speed that you have to deal with. So it's a deck that is at the same time extremely fast and can really put up a lot of speed against us. It's also a deck that is very resilient and has very powerful late game engine. So it basically combines the speed of an aggro deck and the resilience of a value deck and it's just something that is hard for us to manage. Thankfully, we have a very, very solid sideboard plan, which really helps to win the matchup. So we got 3 Shamsindula, 3 I Am Your Father, 2 Confiscate. So Confiscate is very useful against is mostly basically to deal with Chewbacca and basically various amount of upgrades. The I Am Your Father is because it's still a matchup that in the late game will go into the value plan. So once again, your opponent is almost always going to let you deal the 7 damage. And instead of make you draw 3 cards, the Shamsindula is great because it deals with all the 3/5s, as well as being, of course, going to ramp us as well, which helps keep up to speed. As far as what we have to remove a lot of stuff to make this work. Merciless Contest, it's just because I needed space. Top targets, it's nice to have two top targets. There's some situation where it's useful. That's the difficulty of this matchup. There's so many different angles in which he can kill us that sometimes it's not always easy to know what to side out. It also depends on the version you're playing against. The visions are not great in this matchup. There's nothing in the deck that's 3 health, HP or less, so this almost always kill nothing. And the meal plan is not the most likely where you're gonna win. Most likely you're winning by just having an unanswered threat like an Avenger or something, which we do side one out. He's not playing any discard, and games are usually pretty long if we don't get killed very quickly. So yes, those very late game threats are very powerful against Han because he doesn't really run any real removal. However, the way he deals with those cards is usually by bouncing them, which means that having multiple copies of Avengers or multiple copies of Fel Dragon is usually not super beneficial. So this is why I kind of like to just you can basically remove any other like late game card that does work. So this is basically the sideball plan here in this matchup. Obviously, we still Bounty Hunter are not useful in this matchup. Then we got the Vader 4, which is the new deck that kind of like the most recent deck that has made its way into the meta. And this matchup, I have no clear idea of. I haven't played this matchup enough to really have a clear idea on how good the matchup is. So I'm sorry to not be able to give you an estimation of whether it's a good or a bad matchup. But I think it's a matchup that is really winnable for BOSSK. I think one of the main assets we have in this matchup is going to be the ping of BOSSK. The fact that he's playing, of course, all those token units that we can very easily kill using the ping. We can put a bounty, ping it, get some value, kill, and we can kind of keep his board under control like that. The best, obviously, if you get like yourself a client on turn 2, if your opponent has no answer to it, which it doesn't have that many answers, the deck is very, very proactive. We can basically just bounty every single turn with we can basically bounty and kill. So basically every single turn we can kill a 1/1 and heal 5 HP out of our base every single turn for free using client and the BOSSK ping. And I don't think this deck can outrace that, especially if it's losing board. And this doesn't require any resource. And next to this, we can just spend our removal to make sure that the victor leader is not second on board. And stuff like this. So the Vader deployment can be tricky for the deck because it's a very large unit we don't have a real answer to. And obviously using Paradoxite is very difficult in this matchup because he has so many like little units. This is why we run the Confiscate. So 2 Confiscates in the sideboard will help us. Once again, we don't necessarily need to win. We just need to save to basically stay alive until we get to the point where we can play Super Laser Blast and just wipe the board. So Super Laser Blast, I also decided to go for instead of playing 3 copies of Palpatines, which is what I used to do, I went for 2 Palpatines and 1 Snoke. And the Snoke is mostly going to be like a win button in this matchup. If you get a Snoke in play, I don't think there's any way you can possibly win the game from that. So we're basically using this. I think the deck has the tool to win the matchup, but I cannot honestly say whether it's a good or bad matchup because I haven't played enough of it. So this is kind of how I stand about it. But assuming it should be a good matchup once again. The BOSSK ping is such a good asset, and once again we don't need to win the game. We just need to survive until we get to 8, and then the Super Laser Blast. And I don't see how this recovers after Super Laser Blast. It's not able to really produce a lot of value and stuff. And it doesn't have any ways to deal out of hand damage. Like it doesn't have any Falcon, any Cassian, any 4 Cause, I believe, those kind of cards to kind of finish the job. It doesn't have a U-Wing Reinforcement, All-1 to kind of repopulate a board. They don't have the tools to kind of repopulate the board once it gets completely wiped out. So I think this is, as I said, I think it's a good matchup. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that you can get a prestige version of Annihilators on card market for less than €8. I think it's a really good deal, and it's really a beautiful card that is never going to get reprinted. So I think it's a good investment. And if you want to pimp a little bit your control decks, and those sideways Superstar Destroyers card are just so gorgeous. I think it's really cool. Now let's get into our other considerations. A card that basically I decided to not include into this deck, but I think are strong things that I would consider running depending on, once again, the meta and stuff. So get a Fel Dragon. Fel Dragon is just additional like removal. I think it can be useful, especially against Sabine. To have a removal that can deal with sometimes having to spend 5 resource to kill a Wrecker or a Poe is very annoying. Fel Dragon does the same job for 1 less resource, and I think that's quite valuable. So I would never play Fel Dragon instead of No Glory Only result, but you can run it in addition or even in the sideboard. It's something that is doable, and it's going to help you, of course, in other control matchups. So it's something I would definitely consider. Bombing Run, if you find the Vader matchup, the Vader Yellow, to be a bad matchup, or it's just a really played deck in your area, definitely consider running Bombing Runs. That will basically solve the problem for you. 5 resources, wipe the entire board. Is just really strong. Moving on, we got the Force Choke. Force Choke is another card that can help against Sabine. The reason why I'm not running this in my deck or even in the sideboard is simply because, as I said, I don't think Sabine is that bad of a matchup. I think it's a pretty good matchup if you play it correctly. And I also think that this card is really only good against Sabine. I think in any other matchup, making the opponent's draw a card is just too big of a downside, or he plays too much space units, so Force Choke doesn't really matter. So my opinion, Force Choke is great against Sabine, but that's pretty much the only matchup in which it's great. And that's the reason why I've decided to not include it into my deck, because it's too specialized, and it's a matchup that I think is already favorable for BOSSK anyway, so I don't really care too much about adding Force Choke on top of it. So my opinion is, if you want to make the matchup against Sabine even better, you can put some Force Choke in the sideboard, but I would not necessarily recommend it, at least not knowing what the meta is going to be. And then finally is the Entrench. Entrench has the advantage of being a blue card, so more blue card is always good for Charleston. It's the problem with what I have with Entrench is that since the introduction of Merciless Contest, we have so many kind of like edict effects that it's kind of like awkward to play Entrench, because then your opponent is just going to remove. Playing Entrench on the opponent unit is just a little bit awkward. It's a last resort kind of action that you really don't want to do ideally. And I don't feel the need of Entrench anymore. I think we have enough like early game removal that we don't need to run Entrench. Obviously, there's always the possibility of putting Entrench on your own unit, which is nice, but at the end of the day, a BOSSK Entrench still gets killed by an ECL Pole or ECL Wrecker anyway, so it doesn't really make that big of a difference most of the time. So Entrench your own unit still remains a relatively niche play, so that's why I decided to not include Entrench, even though it is undeniably a great card. And that's it for this video, so I'm just going to come back very quick to the list, just to say something very important. Something very important I want to say is that do not copy this list one-to-one, because everybody has different meta, everybody has different things, as different things they have to deal with. So you have to really consider your local meta whenever you're building and you're playing a deck like this. There's tons of like little adjustments that you can make to improve certain matchups. As I said, you can run Force Choke if Sabine is very played in your meta, you can run Force Choke in your sideboard. If you don't play any Quinnland, maybe you don't need to play the Long Pike. Maybe the Long Pike can get scrapped and put something else instead. If you're running against someone who plays a lot of Vader 4, you can put those bombing runs in the sideboard. If you're playing against a lot of out control, if there's a lot of BOSSK in your meta, maybe you can add another bounty into crew in the main. If you are running against a lot of Kira, maybe you can put some you can put like more annihilators, or you can even put like more restock in the main. Like there's just a lot of different ways you can kind of change the deck depending on your needs. There's certain fundamentals. I think the fundamentals, of course, is the package removal, the vigilance, the gameplay, the bounties. I think the Charleston is fundamentals. I think that I've seen just way too many BOSSK players not running Charleston in the main, and I think that's just a mistake. I think Charleston is the key to win against Sabine. You don't need Charleston to win against Sabine, but it really helps if you can have it, and it's also good in just a wide variety of different matchups. So this is my list of BOSSK, how I would run BOSSK Control if I was going to a tournament tomorrow. I hope you find this video informative, and if you got any question, I'm ready to answer them either in the Enigma Discord or simply on the comments below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.